Hi, and welcome to Dip In and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. You can find all my blogs and podcasts over at my website, ydom.co.uk. I'm here today with the incredible Sam Fisher of TDAS, CEO, and she's going to explain a bit more about what TDAS does, and then we're just going to have a bit of a general chat. Yeah. So talking about TDAS, obviously not everybody's going to know what TDAS stands for. So would you explain a bit about what TDAS does in the community, how it's evolved over the years?
Yeah, so TDAS stands for Trafford Domestic Abuse Services, and it's Trafford because that's where we was born in 1990 by some local women who found the need for safe accommodation for women who were fleeing domestic abuse. And it started as a little 4-bed kind of house for families that has developed hugely over the years, like massively, which, you know, I'm smiling about because it's positive, because, you know, the reason why it's developed so much is because we're reaching more people. Our bed spaces, you know, we now have 36 bed spaces across Trafford. A dedicated children and people service, so we've got that dedicated support for them. But then, yeah, we do all sorts in the community, in providing outreach, training, all sorts, volunteer service, group programs. We have amazing group programs, again, just for people who have experienced or are experienced domestic abuse, so they've got that peer support around people with similar experiences. And then we do also deliver children, pupils and adults high-risk service in Salford as well, which we've been doing for, the children's side of that we've been doing for a few years, and the adults one for just over a year now.
It's incredible. And I'll always say amazing things about TDAS, obviously. So domestic abuse, obviously, it's a difficult subject to talk about. How do you think we can open up that discussion so that it's a discussion we can all be having sort of now and in the future, would you say? Because it's a difficult one.
It is, and I think that is a struggle still. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've come on so much further than where, you know, we was. I mean, I've been with TDAS for 13 years, and we are, you know, I've seen a huge shift in conversations that people are having, you know, professionals and non-professionals. But it is a really difficult subject to talk about, because the word abuse in itself, you know, it's, and people often worry about what they're going to open up if they did say something about whether they would get that wrong, if there was, you know, if they was worried about a friend or family member, or people not even recognizing what they're experiencing is domestic abuse. You know, in order for us to talk about it, we have to feel comfortable in talking about it, and it's okay. You know, the amount of times that we've spoken to people who have been through that, and they've literally said, I just wish someone would have asked me, asked me with intent. You know, I remember when I was pregnant, and you know, when you get asked the domestic abuse questions, and she knew I was a domestic abuse professional, like I worked in the field, and she was just like, oh, I don't really need to ask you that question, then that'll be fine. And I was like, that is you know, the assumption that that can't happen to somebody, or that can't, you know, happen, it only happens to a certain type of person, or so. And I think there's a lot of like unconscious biases, there's a lot of like assumptions made, but it's just about that raising awareness. You know, we need to be making sure that our children, young people, know what healthy relationships look like, because again, we're seeing more and more young people coming through in their own unhealthy relationships. You know, and we have the added issues of, you know, misogynistic behaviours that we're seeing so much more of now, and the following in social media. I think we just need everybody to be that voice and that advocate for support services that are available.
And it's knowing where to get support, isn't it? I think that's a lot of the time is because people are ashamed, or they don't necessarily feel like you said, that they're even going through abuse. You don't even recognize it. A lot of the time you just think, well, that's the behavior that they're displaying, maybe it's my fault, you put it back on yourself. So then actually going and finding support is, well, where do I go? And that's why I think it's important to get those kind of links out there that people can see. Well, there is, wherever you live, there is somewhere where you can go. And like you said, no judgment. No one's going to sit there and say, oh, well, you know, no, it's for you to have that time to be able to talk about your experience, because that's one thing that drives me insane as well, is like you just said, it's not a certain type of person, everyone's affected in one way or another. They're affected via either a family member or themselves or whoever. And it doesn't matter who you are, but every experience is different. Nobody's, even though there are similarities, there are always going to be times where the experiences are similar, but everyone's experience is unique, and each person has that right to their voice, don't they, to say, well, actually, this is what I've been through and I need help.
Yeah, and that's where the whole minimizing things come in, like the amount of times in group programs you go, oh, well, mine's not that bad. You know, when someone's it's sharing, and it's like, there isn't, you know, it's not minimalized to you.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need to minimize it. You know, we're talking about where people would go and find help. The majority of the time, domestic abuse services are not going to be the first people that hear about somebody's story, or they're not going to be the first place somebody disclose what they're going through. Absolutely. That is good. That could be families, friends, you know, GPs, hairdressers is a big one.
Yeah.
So, you know, we do work with Trafford College, and we're educating kind of the hairdressing students on domestic abuse, and because, you know, it's like me, my beautician knows everything about me. Like, it's just like absolutely everything. So, and they do, so it's just that kind of awareness around, you know, what services are available, what support is. And, you know, we're not asking anybody to go and get a superhero cape on him and go, right, well, I can save this person, I can do that. You know, there's so many specialist services. Yes, there's TDAS, but there's so many other amazing services in Trafford, in every, you know, in all boroughs, that can support somebody with the actual dedicated support they need to kind of try and move on and cope from what they've been through. But it's just that right response first time, just that non-judgmental, just that understanding, just somebody saying, that's not really okay though, is it?
That I was going to say, that's the thing, is because you've been so subjected for so long into thinking that that's normal behavior, that, you know, when somebody actually points out, says, no, that's not acceptable. It is. And again, you know, especially with children and young people as well, making that clear, that's not acceptable behavior, you know, because if we sort of give that impression that, well, they said sorry, so it's okay, you know, that's not acceptable. The behavior that person has displayed towards you isn't acceptable under any circumstances. And it's getting that message out there. And I think as well with family and friends, you know, we need to be able to support the victims and the survivors, and families and friends hopefully would want them to be supported, so they may go and look for information themselves and say, how can I support you in the right way? I don't want to say the wrong thing, I don't want to look like I don't care. But, you know, I know people over the years have said, I didn't know what to say, I didn't know what to do. And it's really hard sometimes, I think, when you're very close quarters with people, to be able to say, you know, they don't say I understand, because they don't, there's so many aspects of it that's so difficult. And I think if as a whole we can all understand domestic abuse a bit more, and not just pigeonhole it and say, well, I think it's this, you know, it's about one aspect or it's about this. It's on so many levels, it's huge.
It is, and I think that's probably where people struggle, and why people don't recognise certain things, you know, about domestic abuse, coercion and control, for example. You know, that's only not long ago that it's actually a criminal offence now. So, but, you know, with the friends and family, you know, there's the support network for survivors of domestic abuse is vital, because what do we say abusers often do? Isolate them slowly, and then, you know, it comes to the point where, well, they feel like they can't leave because they haven't got anybody else. And what's important is domestic abuse services are available for advice to family and friends too.
And not that's just misconstrued as well.
Not just people who are experiencing it. If you are concerned, or you just want some advice, also you can ring and get that support and that advice. And we'll say, because words matter. Words really matter in this situation. You know, we do still have a long way to go in terms of flipping the language and making sure that, you know, we don't say things that could re-traumatize people or make them feel even more shame that they already do, because that is how people feel. They do. It's a natural response to,
And you've done a video about words matter, haven't you?
Yes.
As well.
And it was just a bit of a myth busting thing. So we've been thinking about it for so long, and it was like, right, if we're going to do a video, what is it? What are the key messages we want the public to see? And it was about words matter. Words matter because, you know, the simplest thing of like, why don't you just leave? Like, and it's about education, and I totally get that, you know, and when you're working in this field, and you know it isn't, you know, it's just important to share that and make sure people are, but that flip, it's not about, well, why don't you just leave? Why don't they leave?
Yeah.
Why don't they leave? And, you know, think about it. You're in a normal, healthy, non-abusive relationship.
Yeah.
You fell out of love.
Yeah.
How hard is it to end that relationship and leave?
And that's supposedly normal relationship.
A normal, unhealthy, you've got children, you've got finances, you might have a mortgage, you've got, you know, in-laws that you might be amazingly, you know, attached to, you've got mutual friends, a whole network. How difficult it is to end a healthy relationship. Yeah. Add abuse and control into the mix.
It's not, you can't, that's the sad thing, isn't it? You can't even comprehend. No. And so if, you know, because it is so huge, it's like, how on earth would you then say to somebody, how then could you think it was acceptable to say to somebody, why don't you just leave? Yeah. If it's so hard to leave a healthy relationship, how much more difficult is it when there's abuse involved and control? Exactly. And what people have been told for so long, what have they been, you know, threatened that, you know, the kids will be removed or they haven't got anybody else. You know, there's so many tactics that are used that, you know, as us on outside don't see, and we just think, well, you know, especially, you know, when there's other services involved and this, you know, and it's also like, oh, well, what's going on? You know, I wouldn't do that in that situation. You don't know. You're not in that situation. You don't know what you do, the control that people have, and it's kind of ingrained in, you know, I think we take a step back and go, wow, what must be going on in that relationship for them to not feel like they're able to. That is how we need to be looking at it. So what can we do to support? Or and the other thing is, when people say, why don't they just leave? Somebody just came to me and said, okay, so you leave, you know, you're in you get to that point where you can actually leave, and not everybody can, not for 1 second can everybody leave. But you get to the point where you leave, what then? So automatically the abuse stops. Oh, it's like done, dusted. It's not that simple, is it? And that's something that is a bugbear of mine, is that attitude. I think a lot of the time is, well, you've left now, so therefore the abuse continues. It doesn't just stop. No, post-separation abuse is just not spoken about at all so much, because you think, right, domestic abuse, power and control, when you're most at high risk, when you're ending a relationship and you're leaving it, why? Because they're losing control. So once you've left, they've lost control, because they've not. So what they're going to do, they're going to up the ante. They're going to make sure they're going to use everything in their power to still control you. Whether that be through social services, family courts is a huge one. Family courts is just used so much to further control. I mean, you know, the domestic abuse bill, yes, there's certain things that are now in place, which is great to see, but we still have such a far way to go for that, to protect that, you know, that person and any children that are involved in that situation. You know, if we're not even at court proceedings, there's still using the children to further control that situation. Absolutely. Friends and family, the intimidation, you know, we have social media now as well, where, you know, we can block somebody off them. We don't need to see them, but they'll find another way around it to find out what you're doing and to continue to harass you or stalk you. Like, it doesn't stop when you leave. And that's exactly. And that, I think, frustrates me so much, because like you say, there's so many other ways you can use technology. You can use, you know, you block somebody, so what? You have children, they'll use FaceTime, they'll use roadblocks to contact the person on, or they'll use some device or trackers, you know, whatever it is they'll do to make sure that they are still in control. And I think that's the hardest thing to explain to anybody who hasn't been through it, is that control just doesn't stop the second you walk out that door. That actually makes it worse. And it isn't going to get, so that the strength to walk away is one thing, the strength to stay, it's so, both sides is just like unbelievably, wow, how anybody does it is just, and then incredible. You get people thinking, well, why have they gone back to that? Because after, but then we also get the flip side, don't we? Other tactics that are used, you know, if you leave, I'll hurt myself, I'm nothing about you, you know, and then it just flips, and I'm sorry, I won't do it again, and you want to believe it, you know, and it's just, and that's that cycle, isn't it? It's that constant cycle of feeling like, you know, this person, you're attached to them and you need to stay with them. It's so difficult, so difficult. And I think it's another thing that irritates me is people say it takes a lot of strength to do this. It takes a lot of strength regardless, because to get up some mornings, whether you're still living with the abuser or you're not, you know, it is that will to carry on, to keep, you know, one of the things I said in one of the, I think I've probably said it in a few blogs now, is I can't stand this kind of move on. You don't move on, you move forward. You know, you take it one day at a time. You might get so far and then something happens and you pull right back again and you've got to start all over again. And it's soul destroying and it's crushing, but you do it for yourself. You do it for, if you have children involved, you do it for your children. You do it because you know that that is the only way you're going to move any kind of way into your future. It's all you can do.
100%. And this is why, again, words matter. Because we're saying, oh, well, yes, go to these services, they'll help you recover. Oh, I'm sorry, but are we ever going to recover? And I think we have to be open and honest about that. We really have to be honest and say, we're not sure if you will ever recover, but what we can do is support you to cope and find them strategies, because domestic abuse and the effects of that, it's a trauma. What people have experienced is a trauma. It's a traumatic, but it's not just a singular traumatic event. It's a pattern often of years of that trauma, and that then continues when they leave. And what do we do when we experience a traumatic event? You know, we lose somebody we love and we grieve, and or you know, there's a certain traumatic event that happens in our life. You know, we seek counselling and we try and get past that. And again, a lot of people don't move on from that trauma, and that's this. You know, it's the same domestic abuse. It isn't like, I mean, there will be some people who feel like they're fully recovered, absolutely, and that is amazing. But I think what we really need to be open and honest about is that a lot of people won't ever fully recover from the effects they've been through. But that doesn't mean to say they won't have a happy and amazing life after it, because they almost, you know, definitely will. If, you know, once that they move on from that, it's about moving forward, but it's about how they cope with it as well, and allowing yourself that, you know, you could go years with something absolutely fine, and then, I don't know, and a friend comes up and is experiencing domestic abuse, and that then brings some back of them memories. Allowing yourself to feel like that, allowing it in, not just going, I can't think about that. That is so true. And I think when we were chatting before, we were talking about the idea of, you know, so much of the time you feel like a failure. But actually, those times that you feel like you've failed are your biggest success stories, because you've survived. What's that saying about, you know, I survived 100% of all the bad things that have ever happened to me, and you've got that far. So it's exactly the same thing. It's, you know, it's not your failures. You've got, you know, you need to sort of hopefully look at it and think, actually, that's my success story. Because if I got through that so-called failure and I'm still here and I'm still moving on, then that is a massive success. And that's the kind of things to celebrate, isn't it? And to say, you know, you might have to be in counselling for a while. You might have to revisit support services, whatever you need to do for you, because everyone's individual. That's what you've got to do. And I just think, I do think it's incredible that the work that TDAS has done over the years is, and where it's going now, it's just, it's unbelievable. It's incredible. It's amazing. And you know, there's so many amazing other support services out in, you know, in all areas, you know, of the country. So what I would say to people is reach out to them, get that advice, get that support. It doesn't have to be about you, it doesn't have to, you know, it could be about somebody you know, and just how you want to maybe approach something or support them with that. But also, we need to, you know, we do a lot of work in schools delivering healthy relationship workshops. We have a full kind of training professionals package, because that is key. We have to make domestic abuse everybody's business. Everybody's. And I think that kind of leads me on to what I say about why do we think it's so difficult to talk about it, is kind of the lack of understanding, the lack of knowledge, lack of education. It's a difficult one, isn't it? And I think it's history, isn't it? You know, we are still in a bit of a transition stage of where it used to be okay to do certain things, and now it's not. You know, and I know, it was a longer time ago. We're still around people who still have them beliefs, and you know, maybe filtering them through to, you know, children or people that they know. So we are in a position where we really need to be making sure that people are educated, and it is around that. You know, when you say domestic abuse, the majority of people will probably, you know, think they understand some aspect of it. But there's so many different elements to it now. Like we were talking before, the coercion and control, like recently the non-fatal strangulation, you know, people that wouldn't be seen as a crime, you know, like, well, you didn't, you know, they're alive. And it's like, well, no, it's because that is such a high risk, you know, kind of situation, and that behavior from like that is ultimate control.
Yeah.
And I think just it is around the education and the awareness raising, and people always, you know, domestic abuse, oh gosh, no, talk about that, oh no. And then even when I go and do kind of presentations or talk at team meetings, and I always say, you know, everyone's looking at me like I'm like, no, it's not doom and gloom. The subject is, and it is a real issue, and we need to be raising awareness about it. But you know, the success stories, the services that, you know, charities and other organisations like TDAS provide, like, it's so rewarding. We see the other side of it. We see all the kind of, you know, the journeys people have gone through and where they're at, and you know what they're doing now and how their lives have changed. And so there is that kind of real positive element in you know, talking about it too, and that there's support. And we've seen huge increases in referrals coming through. I mean, and COVID probably had a lot to do with that, because that was a real difficult time, you know, being isolated, stuck in a house in those situations. But I do think that, I do believe people are becoming more and more aware of domestic abuse and of the issues. But I do think that it's an education thing. It should be mandatory. It should be mandatory training, even, you know, a 45-minute lunch and learn, or mandatory training that this is what domestic abuse can look like. These are the types of potential red flags, or what, you know, similar to what we're teaching young people, which is, again, is key, because, you know, we're training professionals now, and that's, you know, that's fantastic, because we train a lot of people who, like I said before, probably going to hear disclosures way before specialist services like ours do, and they need to like be able to respond in the right way and know where to signpost or refer to. But ultimately, we want to be in a position where we won't need to train professionals, because we've got to them at such an age at school as children that they're fully aware, they know, and that's taken as a, you know, as it's a safeguarding, as what we would see straight away.
I love that, because it just made me think then, because I love my quotes, and on blogs I keep putting quotes, but there's a Desmond Tutu one, and he says, we need to stop just jumping in the river and pulling people out, and we need to go further upstream and find out where the problem is. And I think that's exactly it, isn't it? It is, and we've all got to be in there and supporting people. Let's also go back a bit and see where can we get that support further, you know.
Prevention, isn't it? It's about prevention. That's what we need to do. And we're still at the stage of, you know, early intervention and education, and that's great in itself, because we're seeing a shift in, you know, that we're still having to deal with so many kind of people who are in crisis situations, but a lot of our work in the community is to try and get in there earlier, so you know, that they're not hitting that crisis point where they're at real risk, and you know, they have to leave now, and it can be really difficult. Try and get in there earlier, educate and support and give advice and guidance on what, you know, what they could do, what their options are for them before it gets to that stage. And you know, we will always probably need, you know, some form of refuges, but ultimately, again, and I'm talking ourselves out of a service here, but we want to be in a position where we don't need refuge accommodation, because people don't have to leave their own homes, they don't have to flee, they can stay safe in their own homes, and they can access support services earlier. And because whoever they've spoken to, you know, whether it's a librarian or, you know, their doctor, or, you know, like
they're informed, they understand.
They've been informed to actually look, all right, they sound like doesn't seem like that. Have you thought about contacting these, or even just handing a bit of an information sheet, or giving the website address?
Because I always think as well, you know, we wouldn't have talked about mental health years ago, would we? It wouldn't have been a conversation to have. And I really truly hope that that's the way domestic abuse is going, in that kind of conversation, that actually it is all right to talk about it. It is all right to have a conversation about it. It's not something to go, oh, don't mention it, because so many people think, oh, it's a shame aspect, it's a this, it's that, we can't talk about it because I don't understand it. But you're never going to understand it if you don't talk about it. So it's going to be a vicious circle.
It is, and I still remember I mean, bless him, because my granddad, and I remember when he was alive and he was like, oh, I don't believe in all that mental health. And that generation.
Absolutely. Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah. We'd stiff upper lip. We were all right. Yeah. We don't
just get on with it. And it is that mentality when actually no, it's so like we said, we are seeing the shifts, aren't we?
Yeah,
because
definitely.
And what I think is really important, and I've seen this is like people being so open and honest about that and their struggles, and it not being shamed upon in terms of, you know, this is what I'm experiencing, and just to be imagine being able to feel like that's okay. You know, that's
exactly.
okay that I'm like,
whoever you speak to not feel like, you know, you're sort of saying, because one thing that does bug me, and again, I think I put it in this blog about why don't they just leave, is that aspect of, well, you let it happen to you, you know, that judgment of, well, you know, and that kind of thing. Whereas if you are informed, you'll understand it's never been a case about letting it happen to you. You had no control over that. You had no power over your own life, what you wore, what you ate, who you saw, you know, where you lived. It's all an element of control. And I do think it's such a big, and I think it's brilliant that you can, as a family or friend, contact support services, get that information to educate yourself a bit more, because so many times family kind of go, I don't really know what to say, I don't really know what to do. And I think making everybody kind of responsible in a way for understanding is going to be key, isn't it, to the future?
Absolutely. And I think with what you said there as well, again, around the education about, you know, when you say like, oh, you couldn't, because I was controlled, I couldn't wear what I want to wear or eat what I want to eat. Now, again, for an awareness raising, you know, point of view, that might not necessarily look like somebody going, you can't wear that. No, you're not wearing, that's what I want you to wear today. That might be,
yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure, you know.
Yes.
You know, do you really want to eat that cake? Do you really want, like,
oh my God,
and certain situations that might, you know, but it's how it's said, it's the intent behind it and that pattern of behavior. You know, we when we say control, we automatically think somebody's like literally, and that is the case in many situations. Absolutely. But in other situations, it's a lot more subtler than that. And you know, it is, and which then you start doubting yourself, and that's where that psychological kind of slowly gaslights in. You know, so,
and you want people to get to the point where literally they get to that stage in their life where they can say, yeah, I'm going to eat that cake. 100%. I'm going to, and in fact, now I'm going to have even more of a dollop of cream on top. That's exactly, you know, and it is that taking that power back, if you like, the empowerment of your own life. And I don't think it's obvious to a lot of people that once you do get to that point, it feels bloody amazing to get to that point. You think, I am actually in control of my own life. I am actually, all right, we can't control everything, you can't control the weather, but to actually say, I'm going to wear what I want today, I'm going to eat what I want today, I might have, you know, 5 cups of tea today if I feel like having that. That's what I'm going to do. And that sounds so silly to some people, but to others it'd be like, well, actually, I was told I can only have so many tea bags a day, or I can only have this. And it's that getting that kind of aspect of your life back seems like such little things to people, but to so many others, that's your success stories. There's your triumphs over tragedy.
And again, it's like some people like, I'm able to parent how I want to parent. I'm able to, you know, be with my child how I want to be with my child. But then it is other things like I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this. But I remember one person who we were supporting, and we done like gift packs for Christmas and things that, and there was a lot of nail polish in it. And it was just like broke her heart, because she's like, I'm allowed to wear nail polish. And I was just like the smallest things like that. And it's that this is like, these are the things that are taken away from you, that, you know, like you say, feeling more empowered, being able to wear nail polish.
I know. And I think that's where I think it's so difficult for the level of understanding of people, is because that's where it's going to take time. Because that to most of us would be like, yeah, I can totally get that. But to a lot of people, they're like, what you want about? You know, to me, and that, like you say, that to me, that's giving me goosebumps now. It's just like, yes, I can wear. And actually, you know, I can wear bright red lipstick if I feel like it, because I don't care.
Exactly. But you can imagine the control and the power behind that.
Yeah, how you look. Do you know what you look like when you wear that?
Yeah, like imagine the intense control. And if is that power and control over a nail polish?
Absolutely.
Or over a piece of cake or something you're wearing? Imagine other aspects of that life.
Yeah.
What that control looks like.
That's where it's going to be so hard to fathom. But I think we're definitely on the right track. And I think doing things like this, hopefully, should make it easier for people to talk about. And that's all we're really trying to achieve. That's all I'm trying to achieve, is for people to be able to have a conversation, be able to hear professionals talk about their understanding of it, their experiences, their knowledge, all of that, because I think that's massively important. And hopefully over time, you know, things will develop and we will be at a point where we can say, right, well, now we need to move on. We're going to do part for refugees. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. Yeah. But there will always, I think, be that need for understanding, always. Yeah. And it's a long way off, but we're getting there slowly. Yeah, yes. Slowly. Thank you so much. I am very, very grateful. Very, very grateful indeed, and giving me the opportunity. So we're going to leave it there, and I would just like to say thank you very much, and hopefully you'll join me next time, where we will open up the discussion and say it's okay to talk about domestic abuse.